Hello there, sheet metal technicians. Welcome to the Sheet Metal Empire. Jay Harbert, friendly sheet metal instructor, A&P teacher. Before we start laying out sheet metal parts, we need to understand a couple of terms. So let's focus right now for this video on edge distance and pitch. Yes, there are rules. Edge distance simply defines how closely to an edge that a rivet could be installed. Now, the general edge distance rule, minimum ED for edge distance, let me get this down, minimum ED is always equal to 2D. Preferred, that's our, if everything is going our way and we have an option, we really want 2 1/2 diameters. D stands for diameter. So depending on this scales up and down. See, they give you a D rather than a number so that no matter what rivet size you're using, you can scale up and down and the rule still applies. So this is dealing with ED. Now let's deal with pitch. Now first, let's define what pitch means. Pitch is simply the distance between rivets in the same row. So if we have a bunch of rivets running in the same row, we've got pitch. Our ED is simply the distance from your rivets to the edge of the metal. That one's critical. ED will get you in trouble, edge distance will get you in trouble more often than pitch. Then finally, let's look at our last term. By the way, our pitch, our min, and let me make sure I'm spelling everything correctly, minimum pitch rule, and yep, there's a solid standing rule, is 3D minimum. The preferred is 4. So that's our minimum edge distance and preferred edge distance, minimum pitch, preferred pitch. Let's talk about one more aspect in laying out rivets. It's called transverse pitch, and sometimes it's referred to as gauge, rivet gauge. That's not the tool you use to measure them. In this case, transverse pitch is defined as the distance between rivets in adjacent rows. I always tell everybody in Henry County, adjacent means next to. So the transverse pitch would be the distance between rivets in rows next to each other. Now your transverse rule is 0.75 of your pitch. It's 0.75 pitch. By the way, all of these are test questions, so it's good to know. 0.75 pitch, or you could call that simply 75% of pitch. Either way, that's how we would calculate it. Now, if we're working, I'm going to give you some examples. Let's solve for ED using a number 4 rivet. Well, a 4 is a 4/32 because remember, all rivet diameters are measured in 30 seconds. Well, if we have our minimum of 2D, that would be 2, and if it's a whole number, it's always assumed to be over 1, but I like to write it in to keep my stuff neat. That would be 2 over 1 times 4 over 32 for a number 4 rivet. So our minimum distance from the edge of the metal to our first rivet would have to be 2 times 4 is 8, 1 times 32. And once again, guess what? Handy dandy ruler has 30 seconds, so we could simply measure over 8 30-seconds. Now our pitch rule, let's solve for it. Number 4 rivet, which is a 4/32. Our pitch says minimum's 3D, so it's simply 3/1 times that 4/32 or number 4 rivet equals 12/32. Uh-oh, screwed that up. There we go. 12/32. So I'd simply take my ruler and measure between them for pitch, that's rivets in the same row, as 12/32. How about that, folks? I nailed it almost identically freehand. Now, let's solve for some number 5 rivets. Well, a 5 rivet equals 5/32. And if we were going to go with ED, we know our minimum rule is 2. So we could say 2/1 times 5/32. Well, how about that? 10/32. That can easily be found on our required 32 and 64 scale ruler. So we don't have to do any math conversions. We could do the same thing with pitch. For a number 5 rivet, number 5 is equal to a 5/32. Pitch is minimum 3D, so we could say 3/1 times 5/32 equals 15/32. How about that, folks? It can be that straightforward when you remember your basic rules, and the key factor there is diameters in 30 seconds. I hope this makes some sense. As always, feel free to practice, ask questions when you return to class. Do good work. Be safe.